Yes, y'all. So today we have for you Lilith versus Jezebel, the modern feminist role model. Many men mistake Jezebel for Lilith. They call modern women Lilith, or I should say, they call modern women Jezebel. Excuse me. But the real spirit, the real embodiment of the modern woman, the modern Western woman, the feminist ideal is attributed to Lilith. So we're going to look into this today. We'll see how Lilith is more suitable for these ideals and how Jezebel is actually not really a great figurehead because she essentially failed at her mission. But we'll look into this here. So, who is Lilith? So, Lilith is an extremely controversial figure within Jewish folklore. Lilith's name is not included in the creation story of the Torah, but she appears in several midrashic texts. Her symbolism, history, and literature are debated among Jewish scholars, feminists, and other intellectuals. There are multiple origin stories for Lilith, but the most popular history told views Lilith as the first wife of Adam. So, of course, we're referring to the Judaic biblical story of Adam and Eve, right? Which is very interesting that modern feminism clings to this as a figurehead, considering the overwhelming lack of belief in biblical text or biblical um, folklore, if you will. According to the first Eve story, Lilith was first created by God from dust and placed to live in the garden with Adam until problems arose between Adam and Lilith when Adam tried to exercise dominance over Lilith. This is a very important focal point. One story tells Lilith refused to lay beneath Adam during sex. So obviously here they're referring to the missionary position, right? For their procreation at the time. She believed they were created equal, both from the dust of the earth. Thus, she should not have to lay beneath him. So, this is very interesting verbiage, right? She believed they were created equal. We see this nowadays. This is one of the tenets of modern feminism, right? Is that they believe that men and women are equal. Whereas I would argue men and women are unequal, right? But the inequality is beautiful, right? It's the yin and the yang. Men's strengths are women's weaknesses, and women's strengths are men's weaknesses, and we complement each other quite well. After Adam disagreed, Lilith fled the garden to gain her independence. Very interesting. And these stories are hundreds, if not thousands of years old, right? Adam told God that Lilith, according to the story, Adam told God that Lilith had left, and God sent three angels, Sinoi, San Sinoi, and Samegeloth, to retrieve her. The three angels found Lilith in a cave bearing children, but Lilith refused to come back to the garden. The angels told her that they would kill 100 of her children every day for her disobedience. In revenge, she is said to rob children of life and is responsible for the deaths of stillborn infants and crib deaths. So this is SIDS, it's sudden infant death syndrome, I believe. Male children are at risk for Lilith's wrath for 8 days after birth. This is according to the lore, of course, or until circumcision. So this is Judaic lore, so of course that is paramount circumcision. And girls are at risk for 20 days, although Lilith stole children's lives in the night. She agreed not to kill children who had amulets of either of the three angels. So historically, we had many people that were big on the mythology of Lilith or this folklore. They would actually place um, plaques, or, as they say here, amulets, right? They would place amulets in these birthing areas. So when women would give birth, it was very common that these religious people or these believers of this folklore would place amulets in the room where the child would be held. Right. The history of Lilith. Although the figure of Lilith is commonly found in Jewish folklore and midrash, the origin of Lilith is Sumerian succubus. Right. So this terminology is very important. So we had, independence. We had, she thought herself to be equal as Adam, right? The first Jewish story of Lilith was taught in the alphabet of Ben Sira. Before the introduction of the alphabet of Ben Sira, Lilith was mostly seen as a demoness instead of the first Eve. Due to the ambiguity of Lilith, she has been represented in multiple forms in both literature and art. Some theological scholars acknowledge Lilith as the first Eve, while others see her as a demoness. Historically, in art, Lilith has been portrayed various Lilith has been portrayed variously, ranging from risque versions to Lilith in the garden. To view some of these depictions, so they've got the links here. Lilith is a power symbol. The open-ended nature of Lilith The open-ended nature of the Lilith symbol has allowed different groups to use her as a destructive female symbol or a symbol of female power. Many feminists see Lilith as not only the first woman, but the first independent woman created. In the creation story, she refuses to allow Adam to dominate her and flees the garden despite the consequences, right? So this is a very important figure, right, in the Jewish mythology, and she has been adopted by modern feminists. So we see here, we can see how Lilith is depicted, right? These are some ancient reliefs here, Babylonian reliefs, 1800 to 1750 BC. So this imagery is not new. right? Some certain cultures refer to her as Lilith, refer to Lilith as um, Ishtar as well. It was known in other cultures' mythology. Excuse me. So this is the ancient relief here. The bird-footed woman in Burney relief. Kramer's translation of Gilgamesh fragment was used by Henry Frankfurt, 1937. Emil Kraling, okay. Support the identification of a woman with wings and bird feet. The Lilith is depicted with wings and these kind of bird-like feet, talons. Um, so this is related to a bird of prey, of course. Uh, Frankfurt Kraling identified the figure to be relief of today. The okay. Modern research has identified the figure as one of the main goddesses of the Mesopotamian pantheons, most probably Ereshkigal, but the figure is more generally identified as the goddess of love and war. Identified the figure as Inanna in analysis based on the existence of symbols, attributes commonly recognized. Okay. So as you can see here, this is how Lilith was depicted, right? Very interesting, the symbolism, right? So I discussed the talons, right? The bird like feet, birds of prey, because these are women who adopt this spirit, right? Are said to be predatorial, right? So she has her talons. And it's very interesting what they've done here. She is standing on top of two lions, not just one, but two lions. What does the lion represent? Monarchy, right? These are male lions. You see the mane here. This is the mane, indicating it is a male lion. So she has, in this imagery, she has conquered, right? These lions, representation of masculine monarch, right? A king. This is what Lilith represents. And these lions are seemingly docile, right? These lions, this is not the behavior of lions that you would think, right? If you would depict lions, they're fierce, right? They're aggressive, they're strong, right? But these lions are docile and they're standing under the feet of Lilith, right? Something very interesting I didn't notice before is they gave her these black eyes. Very interesting. That I can't believe that because I always talk about the eyes of these particular women because this is not all women, right? It's pretty upsetting that I have to clarify that. But these are certain women, right, who embody this spirit. This is not every woman. In fact, I would say the majority of women do not adopt this spirit, depending on where you live, of course. Live in a large city, metropolis city, you'll have a higher percentage of these types. But so I always refer to these eyes, and I was on record very adamant about saying how I don't believe that Cassie in the whole Diddy case was indeed a victim of sex trafficking. Was she a victim of abuse, domestic, right? Was she beaten up in that video? Hell yeah. Is Diddy guilty of that? Hell yeah. But was she a victim of trafficking? Did she, actively participate in things where she was forced that were against her will? No, I don't believe that. Because I'm quite familiar with women like this, and I take one look at her and I just don't buy it. So we see how these eyes are depicted here. Very interesting. These dark, empty eyes in the relief in this. I don't know if this is limestone or some sort of synthetic stone that they made at the time. They made this purposely hollow. These eyes are purposely hollow, right? they didn't have to do that because if you look down here, the animals, you have the owls here, the eyes are filled in. Eyes are filled in. The lions, eyes are filled in. Eyes are filled in. So they depicted Lilith to have this empty, soulless look. I find that very interesting. I didn't realize that before. That's insane. When I always refer to these eyes that these Lilith figures have, right? These are the eyes I'm referring to, right? You see a woman with eyes like this, you run away. Man or woman. Any women in the chat, male or female, you see eyes like this, you run. This is not bright eye bushy tail. This is not an innocent person, right? Another example I like to refer to Alison Holker, right, who was the wife of late Twitch, right? These are the eyes. These are those same predatorial eyes, right? You either get it or you don't. A lot of men that have experience with women or experience dealing with women, communicating with different types of women. If you've worked in restaurants, if you worked in bars, you'll understand what I'm talking about here. Look at the difference just between her and her daughter, right? Like I'm not making this up. So it's very interesting that they depicted this in this relief. I find that very interesting. Anyway, so that's the story of Lilith here. I'll go into if I could get this to okay. So in the Hebrew Bible. So the word and I know people are very, the Bible has a very bad name. But I always say, if the Bible was like considered fiction, if it was like a Harry Potter book or a Lord of the Rings series, people would eat that up because at first face value, right? The Bible seems a bit ridiculous. The stories are, very unlikely. But on a metaphorical level, the Bible is full of gold. Even if you don't want to believe the deity aspect, just as a book in terms of searching for wisdom, the Bible is full of tons of lore. So this is from the Hebrew Bible recount, right? So the word Lilith, or Lilith. So Lilith would be in Hebrew, right? The prophecy regarding the fate of Edom. Most other nouns lists appear better documented, with the exception of another half-text documentation. Key pose. Reading scholars and translates often guide into decision of complete list of 8 creatures as a whole. So this is like a compilation of creatures, right? Masoretic text. So you see here, shall meet wildcats with jackals. The goat he calls fella. Lilith, she rests and she finds rest. There she shall nest the great owl. She lays eggs. She hatches these eggs and she gathers under her shadow, right? So hawks are referenced. The Dead Sea Scrolls among the 19 fragments of Isaiah found at Qumran. So the Dead Sea Scrolls among 19 fragments of Isaiah found at Qumran, the Great Isaiah Scroll, renders the creature as plural. So some um, documentation of Lilith regard her as plural, right? Some documentations refer to Lilith as being several creatures. Liliot, I believe that would be Hebrew, Liliot, right? This is a conglomerate of these succubi. Eberhard Schrader and Moritz Abraham Levy suggest that Lilith was a demon of the night, known also by the Jewish exiles in Babylon. Schrader and Levy's view is therefore partly dependent on a later dating of Deutero Isaiah to the 6th century BC, and the presence of Jews in Baghdad in the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which would coincide with possible references of Lilith to Babylonian demonology. However, this view is challenged by Judith M. Blair, who argues in the contents indicates unclean animals. So there's a lot of, cultural back and forth. The screech owl, translated from King James Version, owl, is attempt to render the passage by choosing suitable animals difficult to translate in Hebrew words. So this is very interesting because Hebrew, as does Greek, right? They have many words for the same thing. And in English, we often have one word for many things or one word for something that can be expressed in several different ways. Like in Greek, for example, there are several words or several different descriptors, which essentially are words, for love. So love can be expressed, of course, in many different ways. You could say, I love having hamburgers for lunch. It's not the same love as you would say, I love my wife, or you would say, I love my children, or you would say, I love July, I love the summer. Of course, these are different expressions, different representations of love. So in English, we don't have such a descriptive language. Our language is very simple in a sense. So this is just describing the different ways that they could use to describe Lilith that would otherwise not be able to be used in English because of our lack of descriptor. So very interesting. That's Lilith, and that is the head of modern feminism. I have to be careful because some of these paintings have some nude imagery. Can't put that on the YouTube live. Um, I'm looking specifically for a paragraph. So let's see what this young lady has to say. I believe this is a Jewish scholar. So this is Aviva Cantor Zaka. Okay. So she's written this article, Evil Demon or Feminist Role Model. Right. So this is during a Jewish holiday. She's preparing this deep dive on Lilith. She goes, as a feminist Jew, I have been struggling with what to make of Lilith. She is, within Jewish circles, portrayed as a demon who causes various problems for pregnant women, newborn babies, and sleeping men. Seeking more information, I recently picked up a copy of Raphael Pitai's book, The Hebrew Goddess. Pitai traces the history of Lilith from the first mention of her in Sumeria around 2400 BCE, where one of her demon offsprings is the father of Gilgamesh. In Babylonia, she seems to be a goddess of the night, taming wild beasts. In the Talmud, she has the appearance of cherubim, who is Adam's first wife, the one who insisted on equality with Adam. When Adam would not see her as an equal, she spoke the deity's name, flew off to the Red Sea, rumored to be place of demons, and became one. Bataille argues through archaeological remains that Jews were on the whole very scared of her and often sought protection from her. So this again to what I refer to as them placing amulets in places of birth for the children. This general fear has continued to modern times within some Jewish sects. In fact, Patai concludes that his section on Lilith with the following a citizen of Sumer, 2500 BCE, and an East European Hasidic Jew in 1880 CE would have readily recognized each other's beliefs about the Copernicus machinations of Lilith and each other's apotropaic measures for driving her away or escaping enticement. I find this persistence of her demonization intriguing and also very patriarchal. So we see which direction she's going already. She's saying that, you know, y'all ain't seeing Lilith for who she really is. As a kid, I read a book of the Three Little Pigs, and it was written by the wolf. It was the wolf's perspective of the Three Little Pigs, and he really just had a cold that day. He was just sneezing. He wasn't trying to pull their house down. He was just sneezing. That's his recount of the events. Three Little Pigs on the wolf's perspective. Yet I often struggle to see what could be redeeming about her history. Okay, so she's trying to be nuanced here and unbiased. Okay, one can learn and should critique the demonization of a woman, Lilith, who only wanted to be equal to a man. It's like, so she's basically alluding to the fact that the only reason she's defending her is because it's a woman, and she has like this bias where, you know, she wants to be equal to men. I don't know. Let me and take that down. F in the chats for not taking stream starting soon down. Okay, but she is basically saying that she supports this figure just because it's a woman, and she feels that this person was demonized because they wanted to be only, she used the word only, because they wanted to be equal to a man. It's very interesting, right? You know, women get this this fear that men around them are just trying to have power over them for no reason whatsoever. The fact, or to consider the chance that this is a evil, terrible human being is very unlikely to most women because, you know, she's a woman. She just being a girl. Should be in a girl, you know. She's just being goofy girl, goofy gal. She's just trying to have her hot girl summer. Unbelievable. This is a lengthy article. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but Zukoff summarizes the power of Lilith beautifully. It is not her evil reign of destruction, as patriarchy would have us think. I mean, I don't think. Look, she's trying to paint this as if patriarchy has depicted Lilith in this light because they're evil, um, patriarchal, controlling men. But why is it? I find it very interesting, and I see this a lot when I make posts on Instagram. Why is it that when you make a criticism of modern Western women's behavior, that they come in the comments and claim that you are going against women? They the most fringe, aggressive, irate feminists love to tie themselves together with all women. And my rebuttal is always, I'm not going against women. I have nothing against women. I love women. I'm a gentleman. But you are not, in my opinion, you're not a woman, right? I don't see feminists as women. They are beings, they are female, but a woman is a whole character, just as how a man is a character as well. You would ask these same feminists if there's a burning building and a man is well suited, right, to save some children in this burning building, right? Let's say the guy is physically fit. Let's say the guy is you know, well, he's physically fit. He's on the scene of the fire. The children can be easily saved. He They can see that the fire is not in the section yet where the children are. He could easily go in and save them, but he doesn't, right? He's scared. He's scared to save the children. I'm sure if you ask 9 out of 10 feminists and you give them that, you paint that picture for them, you paint that hypothetical, 9 out of 10 feminists would say that that's not a man, right? That's a male, but that's not a man, because a man would likely go inside the building and try to save the children, right? So there are archetypes of men. No one is scared to paint you a picture of what a man is. Nobody's worried or afraid to tell you what a man is, what a man's duties should be, how a man should carry himself, how a man should behave. But then when you flip it over to women, all of a sudden there women have no duties. Women have nothing to live up to whatsoever. It's just kind of a come as I am type situation, right? These women, and a lot of men will talk about this accountability issue, that women have a lack of accountability. And this is seen when women come into a comment section which is discussing radical fringe behavior, and they try tying that to my grandmother who was a homemaker, who was took pride in her family, right? Took pride in the meals that she would create, right? She would, when women of old time would make a meal, this was a proud moment for them. They took pride in their recipes, proud in, their secret recipes that only they retained. They would share with other women, aunts. They would share with cousins, right? They knew the importance of family. They knew the importance of what they did in the home is reflected onto the outer world by the people in their family. A woman that leads her house with warmth, love, and good food, of course, because food is our fuel, food is healing. So these women that led their household, right, with these, they had domestic quote unquote chores, right? But they took pride in this because they knew that the men and women in their family, when they go out into the world, would shine that love onto others. They understood this. But for some reason, these new uh progressive women, they see no value in this. They're very self-centered, right? They just believe in, oh, I gotta work, get a buck. I want to work for myself. They're all, portraying this worry of a man leaving them, abandoning them, which I find very interesting because they're essentially telling on themselves. They're essentially saying, look, I know that I'm not worth it and a man's going to run off on me. If you're so worried about such thing, what does that say about your character? What does that say about the history you've had with men where you're so worried that a man's going to run off on you? That's very interesting. But that aside, this was not a depiction of all women by an evil patriarchy, as this woman is saying here, right? Because there are plenty of women that are described by these same people, these same quote unquote patriarchal men, and they're not depicted like that. These were a select few women were depicted as these evil characters, right? So I find it interesting how she says the patriarchy would have us think. They did not depict her like this. This is just displaying what took place, right? This is just retelling of the story of Lilith. The story of Lilith is one of defiance. It is one of independence. This wasn't a hit piece these people made on her, right? This was a cautionary tale for young men to look out for this type of spiritual energy in certain women. Again, I go back to these chicks, right? Every man has seen a woman like this. Some men can recognize it, some can't, right? A lot of people I notice can't recognize this. Not my problem. But when you see women that look like this woman on the right here, This is a Lilith. So back in those days, these were cautionary tales to help young men identify these women. This spirit is older than time itself, right? These are the dark eyes depicted so well in this relief. I can't believe it. So this lady would have us believe that this is evil patriarchy. Rather, Lilith. So this is already I see how the angle she took. This is her takeaway. Rather, Lilith's power is in her fight for justice and the way in which she embodies equality between men and women. Well, I would argue that equality between men and women is injustice. Because if you make men and women equal, that is not balance. The balance is in the inequality. If you were to say women are as physically strong as men, an absolute claim, women are as physically strong as men, right? That would create an inequality. Why? Because the how should I put this? The standards for women now would be the standard of men. I'm talking in terms of physical strength, right? So the fact that many people understand that women are physically weaker, many things in our world are adjusted differently to suit that. But if we now decided that men and women are equal, then that would be a total injustice. Suppose suppose they started taking away. This is going to be a great example here. Suppose now in men's bathrooms we have a few urinals and we have fewer stalls, right? In a women's washroom they have zero urinals because women don't stand up to urinate. Again, this is an inequality, but is it an injustice? Women don't stand to urinate, so they don't have urinals, right? You go to any of these young Zoomers that go to music festivals. No, I ain't lying, right? Go to any music festival. Women's bathroom, men's bathroom. Which one is more full? Which one has a longer line? Always the women's bathroom. So imagine now if they decided we're going to put urinals in women's washrooms. This is not any trans debate dog whistle. This is truly for the sake of the hypothetical. Imagine they would put urinals in women's washrooms. What would happen? Well, obviously, because seemingly none of the women or near none of the women stand up to urinate. There may be some, I'm sure. That would create a longer line because there would be less stalls, which are actually accommodating the women. So this idea that equality equals justice, that in itself is a very men and women have their strengths. Men have their strengths where women are strong, men are weak, and where men are strong, women are weak. So the certain aptitudes stand that this inequality is justice. The inequality in nature is naturally occurring on a level of something that's not even near as um, complex as humans. On the very simple level as insects, simple level of plant life, horticulture, you see male and female representation is always different. You look at birds visually are completely different based on their lifestyle. A male cardinal is beautiful. Male cardinal, I believe, part of this whole, equality thing and this when it comes to the sexes. And I don't mean in other aspects. Other forms of equality can be argued, but when it comes to this whole sexual equality, I think one of the required prescriptions for that is the lack of education in general about nature itself. Because when you look at nature, the less people are online, the less people are on their computers, the more people are outside observing nature and physical reality, the less people would believe this nonsense of this equality because animal kingdom, nature itself is not equal. So you look here, male cardinal. Why does he look like this? Because he's trying to get his pee on. He trying to walk like a PM. No, but he dressed up on the reels, all jokes aside, right? Look at him. He looking damn good, right? He looking damn good. He looking damn good. And you look at the female cardinal. I'm not gonna say she's drab. She looks good for what she's supposed to look like, but she's not an attractive bird as the male cardinal is, because the male cardinal has to attract the female. So the nicer female. This is nature. This is basic nature, right? You go outside and you start to see this. This is why in large cities people are more subtracted or they're more removed from this type of ideology. This is why a lot of people in rural areas are a lot more quote unquote traditional. I don't like to use that lingo too much because traditional is kind of out the window these days, but or what is traditional, can't really define it nowadays. But when people are removed from natural life, right, observing how the world really works, they start to have all these crazy ideas about equality with gender. So now looking at Jezebel. Jezebel is another figure that a lot of right wing men like to call these women. They call her Jezebel spirit. But I argue that the spirit is more closely tied to Lilith than it is tied to Jezebel and the wife of Ahab. Israel, Jezebel, along with her husband, in, instituted worship of Baal on a national Yahweh from Israel, damaging the reputation of the Omrides dynasty. But initiating the worship of Baal, right? She's known for removing the prophets, right? The religious prophets and scholars. So she was doing an inversion, right? So while many modern women do borrow from this type of ideology or this archetype, most women don't follow this. They're more the archetype is more suited to Lilith. But this, there is some overlap. Jezebel is ruthless, willful, cold, ambitious, and cunning in the sense that she is utterly willing to destroy anyone who is against her or do anything to protect her own. So this could be, interpreted as very leftist leaning people, right? Who are essentially in a cult. I'm not going to say that right wingers are not also in cults, but this whole partisan mentality of it's my team can do no wrong, right? However, she is also arrogant and self-centered to a fault. So you see, this is where the overlap is. This lends itself to these women who say, "Why would I cook for a man when I could cook for myself? I don't need to worry about some," which is contrary to feminine energy. By the way, feminine energy is very full of empathy, right? Maternal instincts. A lot of the women nowadays, they don't have an ounce of maternal instinct in their body. That's why you see when a lot of them become mothers old, when they have their first child, These are terrible mothers. You know, people used to say, just because you father a child, it doesn't make you a dad. That's very true, right? A lot of dads will father children and run off. But now you see women, but because of this masculine masculine energy integration into female communities, a complete divergence from maternal energy. These chicks don't have a maternal bone in their body. This malicious nature, along with her undying loyalty to the pagan god Baal, has the Christian doctrines regard her as a false prophet. So, undying loyalty to the pagan god Baal. You have a lot of atheists who believe that believe in God. What they don't realize is there's it's impossible to not worship a god. You may not worship uh as they call it Sky Daddy. You may not worship a creator of all things in the heavens, right? You may think that that's baloney or ridiculous, but you have a god. Your god could be TikTok. Your god could be your god could be Instagram. Your god could be a myriad of things. It's not just because you don't call it God that you are not in active worship. A lot of people have celeb. Grandmother used to say whenever I would go over to my grandparents and I would be on my computer and I'd be playing some music, it would be some trap music, some kind of crazy stuff with some violent lyrics. And she used to always ask me, "Are you saying your prayers? Like, what are you doing there? Are those your prayers?" And I didn't understand. As a young kid growing up, I thought these old people were nuts. All I think about is that God stuff. That's what I used to think. Now I grow up, I'm older. I'm like, yo, those are prayers. What you concentrate on daily, those are prayers. What is religion? Religious. It's something you practice regularly, daily, right? So if every day your routine is to go online and check out what this streamer said, or to go online and check out this new merch drop, this product drop, that is what you're meditating on. Those are your prayers. So these atheists who believe that they don't have a God or they don't believe in God, they're some of the most religious people out there. They just call it a different name. Atheism is a form of religion. Is practicing her undying loyalty to the pagan god Baal. I'm not going to go into that on this stream, but if you look into the pagan god Baal, these are some of the things that people are practicing today. They don't even realize what they're engaging in. So that is a quick overview of Jezebel depicted here. She looking mad. She's looking for a victim, really. That's what it looks like in that photo. But this is the modern women, folks. This is the modern woman. This is the modern woman. These are women because I also find it very interesting. These so-called feminists will go on these podcasts or they'll do interviews and they'll talk about how you know they'll talk about how gender is a social construct and men can be sensitive, men can be in touch with their emotions, and then the interviewer will ask them what is their type. Now you got to if you go down this line of logic with these people, you got to let some time elapse, because they may catch on if you do it too quickly. But if they're describing all these things about how they see men should behave and how women can be leaders and all this stuff, you just let maybe 30-40 minutes elapse and you ask them, "Hey, what's your type? What's your type of man?" They're going to go into how I like a man, brown hair, tall, mustache. Not a mustache that's too big, you know, just a small mustache in the middle of the mouth. Just a small mustache. That's who they're gonna describe. You ask these feminists their type, and they describe a dude with a small mustache in the middle, very small mustache just in the middle. They describe exactly the opposite of what they're pushing. These chicks don't want to date no soft liberal man. They're on record. All of them are saying, there aren't so many liberal men that they find attractive. These girls go on record of saying on record saying that. So I find it very interesting. They're trying to condition men to act a certain way, and then they openly admit that they're not attracted to that. You know, very interesting. Men should be soft. Men should be in touch with their emotions. Then they describe mustache man in the flesh, their ideal man. Unbelievable. Let me see this other one. This is another one. This is another one here. These are Lilith figures. And going back to the imagery now of the lion, docile, right? The man represents the lion. The man represents, um, masculinity is viewed as lion energy, right? Monarch, patriarch. So the fact that they depicted Lilith like this thousands of years ago with talons. Talons are only on birds of prey, birds who fly around, find their prey, and inject these claws into the flesh of the prey, whether it be a fish or a small rodent. These are birds of prey who have these types of feet, right? The owls have similar prey-like feet, carnivorous birds, right? And she's standing on top of these two docile lions, not one, but two docile lions. She has them completely tamed at her beck and call, right, with her empty ass eyes. And you look at these types of men, these are the tamed lions. These are the tamed lions. This is another one. These are the tamed lions right here. Look at this dude and look at her, right? Look at this dude and look at her. Michelle Obama is another one. These are tamed lions. These are men who otherwise should be, strong, confident, dominant. But this Lilith energy reduces them to this. So that's the story of Lilith. That's the story of Jezebel. If you like the stream, like it, subscribe, share. If you missed it, rewind and rewatch it. It's a good one. All right. See you soon.